Our next guest is David Costa, who is Dean of Robert Kennedy College and joins us live from Zurich. David, let's get back to our top story. Osama bin Laden is dead. Do geopolitical events, in your mind, ever affect the market over a longer-term period? Does the sentiment generated by this story have ramifications for how our viewers invest?
A very good morning to you, Steve. Yes, I do see in this case one of the turning points possibly for the US dollar to go in the other direction. And that was part of my concern. When I saw those big moves both on silver and gold, I would say that this could be one of the events that would see a retreat on some of the precious metals. On gold, I see a different picture because many institutional investors and central banks have accumulated gold and they're not likely to sell at the first change, which is not as substantial yet. But in some of the commodities, including silver, which had dramatic increase in the past, this could certainly have an impact, and also an impact in the US dollars if we see a better date on Friday.
David, this is Chloe. What about this risk premium that we see in the energy markets? Right now, oil, commodities, a lot of them is getting lower. But what if there is a retaliation? Ultimately, how does this change the scope in terms of investors?
This is certainly a concern. The risk premium in oil is still there. I don't see the risk premium being going away. It's still there on the market. It's still priced in. We haven't seen a huge move on the oil yet. So much depends to look at what was going to be the next events, if there's going to be some sort of retaliation or not. But the fundamentals of oil remain still positive because of the unrest in the Middle East not being gone away and actually in some of the parts being still in the core. So I see oil potential still there, as opposed to some of the commodities which have more of a speculative move.
And do you think it's a good idea to short defense stocks, actually not get into them at all now that Osama bin Laden is dead?
Well, I'm not a big shorter, to be honest. So I think it's still very early to make a decision. This could be just a bit of profit taking at the moment, and might be even an entry point, particularly for gold. So it might be a bit too early to show, but I still think that there are some equations which might break in the idea now, which is long commodities, short US dollars. When I see this huge position in short US dollar, I start to think that there might be a reverse sooner than investors expect.
David, you keep mentioning gold, and I know you really love that metal, and let's face it, in the past, your statements have come out to be true, and fairly accurate for that matter. How much of a risk premium is there in gold, then, at the moment? How much is that driven by the geopolitical tensions, and how much of an impact will the latest development have on that metal?
Well, I think the situation of gold, for instance, here in Switzerland, where some of the first founds of physical gold, if investment funds first appeared, the situation is pretty clear. There are a lot of institutional investors that accumulated gold as a sort of edging toward the US dollar. So the long-term perspective of gold are still there, but correction have to be seen, have to be expected on the short term. So the best way to play gold at this stage is really to accumulate for the long term, in the view also of a potential continuous weakening on the US dollars until the monetary policy doesn't change. That said, I don't see dramatic move on the upside. And let's not forget that the US dollar, the gold increase in US dollar terms have been quite relevant this year, but if you look at it in Swiss franc terms, have not been relevant at all. So it's much of a US dollar play and depends how the dollars develop. Some of the premium is already priced in gold efficiently.
David, I want to go back to the original point you made in your first answer, that this could be a turning point for the dollar. Apart from the positive sentiment, and I agree, of course, there will be a lot of positive sentiment today, possibly going through for the next few sessions, we still have a $14 trillion issue in the United States. We still have a logjam in US political establishment about what to do about that problem. I can't see that going away any time soon, and hence I see sentiment towards the dollar could turn negative again fairly quickly.
That's certainly accurate. That said, I see a lot of pessimism on what the position of the Fed is. And I think the Fed, in total honesty, have been fairly clear on what their intention is to have an increase of the data, have a reduction of unemployment and better data before than worrying about the US dollar. So what if that picture will really develop on having more reduction on unemployment than expected and having a stronger economy than expected? In that case, the dollar will see further traction. So what I'm not saying that the sperm are going away. I said there is too much of a negative vision of the US dollars because there isn't much more of a safe haven in euro or the currency because situation can turn negatively here and then make the US dollar look less negative.
So the reaction that we're seeing in the hours after we get this big news that Osama bin Laden is dead, the U.S. dollar managing a slight pickup, this is temporary. Is that what you're saying?
At the moment, it is certainly too early to make any assessment of what the situation is. Much I would see depending on the real data and not just of a temporary sentiment on the news of today. So I'm still cautious on the US dollars. I want to see some data. I want to see some concrete facts. But I don't exclude that the Fed might be, for once, right on the overview of what to do on the US dollar.
David, very nice to see you today. Thank you so much for joining us. David Costa, the Robert Kennedy College professor out of Zurich. Right, let's move on. European opening call.